In a moment of contemplation, Pierce Pei abruptly woke up. Looking at his own hands, Pierce Pei realized he was no longer just himself. Suddenly he heard Evander, who calling him from outside the window. He threw a dagger to Pierce Pei. Pierce Pei saw that this dagger was half a finger thick. It had been tempered twice. This was a dagger of the Shadowglow City, the Chen rank. Evander, whose face lit up as he said, "Let me experience the Blade Emperor's successor. Let's see if it's a fake. You try to attack me, hitting this dagger in the process. Even if you win, I'll treat you to the fine wine from the Lord of City's collection." After understanding the situation, Pierce Pei responded with a slight sense of relaxation. "Old Hu, don't boast. I am skilled in using knives. It's like playing the game of chopping wood with a sharp knife. I've been playing it since I was young. I'm very proficient." Pierce Pei clapped the knife in his hand. Recall the teachings of Seventh Uncle. The character for dragon on the knife, slightly resembling a willow leaf. Seventh Uncle said, "Grasp it with a grip of 75% to fully leverage the knife's advantages." The strike that even Uncle with Chicken didn't react to at first. Pierce Pei has been quietly practicing. Let the knife follow your heart in the moment of striking. The knife seems to lead with the heart, but drags with tail strength. With a flick of his wrist, Pierce Pei made no sound with the steel knife, yet it had already swept around in a circle. Who would have known that as the steel knife swept past, Evander, whose copperwood scabbard in his hand flickered slightly, yet remained firmly in place. Its tip pointed downward, as if he had never made a move. Pierce Pei couldn't help but pause. Could it be that old whose movements are faster than mine? Although Evander, who successfully avoided Pierce Pei's knife, he couldn't help but admire it inwardly. Just now, that knife had already reached the realm of unity of heart and blade, something many knife wielders may never achieve in their lifetime. What kind of material is this kid made of, after all? Evander, who smirked and said, "Now it's my turn to attack. You dodge. If I hit your scabbard 3 times, you lose." The outcome of this game was known from the beginning. No matter how Pierce Pei dodged the scabbard, Evander, who always moves slightly, easily hitting the target with a knife, extremely accurately. It's as if Evander, who knows exactly where Pierce Pei will dodge to. Evander, who explained, "This is the resonance between the intentions of the knives. It is the changes in the scabbard in your hand that drew out my knife. When the wind blows, the tree sways. It's not that the tree only moves when the wind is strong, but rather the moment the wind moves, the tree is destined to sway." Pierce Pei understood the principle after hearing it. In the next moment, before the thought, "The knife is coming," arises, he suddenly waved the wooden scabbard horizontally. A sharp gust of wind brushed past his elbow. Evander, whose steel knife fell empty for the first time. Evander, who also gradually became serious. Pierce Pei, on the other hand, gradually entered the fascinating realm of forgetting oneself and the world, abandoning the extraordinary sharp 5 senses different from ordinary people, forgetting his own developed and superior body. Never thought about when to stop. Just let the body's movements balance with the knife. Advance, retreat, evade, like a shadow. The situation when facing Silly Donkey during the day suddenly became clear. Can Pierce Pei win against Old Hu? Why did Old Hu suddenly teach Pierce Pei swordsmanship? In Pierce Pei's perception, the trajectory of the sword is like a specific and subtle armillary sphere. Once the sword passes through, it leaves a trace that never disappears. Slowly, the direction of the sword becomes clear. It can be understood without the need to rely on the eyes, ears, or touch. Even to the point of predicting, he boldly sent the tip of the scabbard onto the track. Suddenly opened his eyes, only to see Old Hu holding a steel knife sideways. The nearly 2-foot blade was perfectly inserted into the scabbard, accurate to the nearest millimeter, exquisite and flawless. As if the two had practiced this 1,000 times, only then could they exhibit a moment of harmony in the fast knife duel. They responded instantly and skillfully. Evander, who also had a smile on his face. Pierce Pei felt for the first time that this was how it felt to learn knife skills. The knife could actually reach such a level. Evander, who composed himself and smiled faintly. Just now was just a warm-up. Now let's play for real. We both need to attack and defend. If the scabbard is hit, it's considered a loss. Regio, standing behind the trellis, clearly saw the scene before him. Is it tofu or a knife after all? Pierce Pei already had his own answer in mind. Then when it's so difficult to deal with tofu, let this old man handle it. 2 hours later, Pierce Pei and 2 other figures toast and chat over wine. Evander, who said, My self-created sword technique emphasizes being intentional yet seemingly unintentional. At first glance, it may bear resemblance to the divine imperial blade. If you manage to learn it, you will be less likely to reveal your hand in the future. I thought you would find it challenging to grasp, but it seems like you have practiced it before. Pierce Pei took another sip of wine and asked, Does this sword technique have a name? Evander, who said directly, It's called Unmatched Swift Slash. Just now, you only hit the scabbard once. Next, you need to practice until you can match me in a sword fight. At this moment, a girl ran into Pierce Pei's courtyard. She bowed and said, Lord of the Imperial Guard. I, Claralina, will serve the Lord from today on. I am 15 years old. 2 years ago, I was chosen by the second manager to be a maid. I have a lovely and charming round face. I have a very cheerful and lively personality. I am the dream lover of many Department of Reverence disciples. Old who envies such treatment, and so do all the readers and the outpost. He grabbed Pierce Pei and said, I should have become an Imperial Guard myself. After the joking around. Evander, whose teaching for today ends here. Claralina brought Pierce Pei to the new residence. Pierce Pei casually asked, Didn't the second manager ask to see me? Claralina responded, It seems like the second manager is extremely busy. They are arranging and responding to correspondence day and night. Pierce Pei thought, The second manager is so busy. It must be because they have caused such a big mess. Will the curse of the cursed sword descend upon Shadowglow City because of this? Just like when Xuanqi Featherlight Hall was serving as a personal attendant in the past, being by the second manager's side, as an Imperial Guard, they couldn't do anything. But on second thought, at least I helped Crimson Clouds. I wonder how they are doing now. Claralina returned to the second manager. Claimed that the Lord of the Imperial Guard is very worried about you. Shadowhung ordered. Come visit me once a day. Serve the Lord of the Imperial Guard well. At this moment, Shadowhung looks preoccupied. He is thinking that there are only 2 days left. How do you think Shadowhung will solve the problem in front of him? Will he kill? Or not kill? Or? Pierce Pei actually stormed into Shadowhung's bathroom. At a location in Shadowglow City, Shadowhung sent over tailored dresses for Moonlit Water's disciples. Yi Tassel Huang and Indigo eagerly swapped their favorite clothes. But Crimson Cloud sat aside reading a book. She, who has been practicing martial arts since childhood, is not used to wearing women's clothing. At this moment, Crimson Cloud looks listless. Yi Tassel Huang looked at Crimson Cloud's condition. Can't help but think of yesterday at the banquet. Crimson Clouds is so protective of Pierce Pei, I wonder if Pierce Pei noticed. I don't know what Pierce Pei is doing now. In the backyard, the figures of Pierce Pei and Evander, who alternated again. The practice of sparring with each other continues. In just a few days, Pierce Pei was able to land many blows on Old Hu. This progress is simply lightning fast. Pierce Pei has also mastered some essentials, attacking decisively. When dodging, he pays more attention to positioning instead. Pierce Pei feels like he is slowly getting the hang of it. Evander, who shook his arms, claimed there's no time to catch your breath. Let's keep going. The two fought vigorously until the sun set in the west. The scabbard was chopped into pieces. Pierce Pei collapsed on the ground. Evander, who also ignored rest and said, You did a great job today. Tomorrow we can attack at sunrise. Still in this place. Looking at the departing Evander who Pierce Pay, there was a hint of confusion. Always feel that old who has been quite impatient recently. Could it be that he is afraid of Victor Chandler retaliating against him? But now he is in Shadowglow City, relatively safe. Pierce Pay, who was on his way back to the courtyard, overheard the maids saying, "Hong, the second manager, has been feeling anxious recently. It is said that he hasn't slept for 2 nights in a row." Yang Zhong tried to persuade him, but it was of no use. Pierce Pay heard this. He suddenly thought that he had implicated Shadowglow City in the chaos of cursed swords. He immediately decided to take responsibility for his actions. He ran over to see the second manager. Upon arriving at the second manager's mansion, he did not see any guards. Not even Yang Zhong was there. Pierce Pay carefully walked towards the inner courtyard. He didn't encounter a single maid. Just as he was puzzled, Pierce Pay suddenly saw thick smoke emanating from a side courtyard, accompanied by the smell of something burning. At the first moment, Pierce Pay thought that the second manager's room was on fire. Without hesitation, he rushed into the room. But he never expected that the scene in front of him would be unforgettable for Pierce Pay for the rest of his life. Behind the screen was a large oval-shaped wooden barrel. Shadow Hung wore only his close-fitting underwear, eyes closed, soaking in the barrel. Pierce Pay actually barged into Shadow Hang's bathroom. Shadow Hang's wet hair strands hanging down behind the wooden barrel. Her 2 delicate snow-white arms were resting on the edge of the barrel, exposing her smooth and beautiful skin. Pierce Pay was dumbfounded and couldn't speak for a moment. "Get up! Hurry up, Pierce Pay!" Just as Pierce Pay realized he wanted to go out, he suddenly heard the voice of heir apparent coming from outside the door. "I only heard Peek Dugu loudly saying that the servant had just reported." He saw with his own eyes a man entering the second manager's room. Upon hearing this, Pierce Pay was almost scared out of his wits. If discovered, not even 10 lives would be enough. In the panic, Shadow Hung spotted him first. Immediately after, heir apparent lifted the door curtain and walked in. "I was thinking that if I caught you red-handed, Shadow Hung, let's see how you explain it this time." But the situation was different from what heir apparent had in mind. In the room, other than Shadow Hung, there was no one else. I was taken aback. Suddenly, I heard Shadow Hung say coldly, "Heir apparent, do you know what you are doing?" At this time, heir apparent no longer had the confidence he had just now. He thought to himself that he should not have made a mistake. Shadow Hang's cold voice rang out again. "My lord handed over the management of Shadowglow City to me. Heir apparent pretended to have someone break into my bathroom. To tarnish my reputation, is he trying to challenge my lord?" I didn't expect to find Pierce Pay in this bucket at this moment. Heir apparent is still unwilling to give up, snorted angrily. "If you want someone to wash your back and bathe you, you might as well look for me. Why bother hiding like this?" As soon as these words were spoken, a handle was exposed. Shadow Hung sarcastically said with slightly parted red lips, "Is this how heir apparent got concubine Yunjin? She is the most beloved songstress of your father. Do you have a relationship with her? If this spreads out, can you still maintain your title and reputation?" Heir apparent never expected this. Shadow Hung actually knows about this matter. He was shocked and turned pale instantly. Shadow Hung continued with determination, advising heir apparent, "My lord, despite the early misfortune that left you childless, there are miraculous talents in this world. The future is long. Do not think that sitting in the position of heir apparent will guarantee you worry-free days. Immediately roll out, otherwise, I promise to make you regret your rash rudeness today." The heir apparent hurriedly fled in a panic, not daring to stay any longer. He watched the heir apparent walk away. Shadow Hung quickly pulled Pierce Pay out from under the water. At this moment, Pierce Pay has lost consciousness. It should be because he didn't have time to take a breath before entering the water. Shadow Hung felt compassion for Pierce Pay, who had drowned like this. Rather than struggling, he would rather swallow water. The top priority is to give Pierce Pei artificial respiration. Shadow Hung took a deep breath. The soft lips enveloped Pierce Pei's lips. The warm touch slowly brought Pierce Pei back to consciousness. A splash of water brought him back from unconsciousness. Shadow Hung and Sky Strike Dugu actually have this kind of relationship? Pierce Pei opens his sleepy eyes, seeing Shadow Hung sitting in front of him. Suddenly startled and got up before Shadow Hung could speak. Then he lied and explained in a mess. I saw the smoke and thought it was on fire. I didn't expect it to be like this. Have I committed a deadly sin? Unexpectedly, the Shadow Hung in front of him smiled tenderly instead. Not angry or annoyed. Slowly said, Don't worry, heir apparent. He's a fool. And now I have another handle on him. You act so reckless. Just like my little brother did back then. Hearing the second manager say this, Pierce Pei couldn't help but ask, Where is the second manager's brother now? Talking about his brother, Shadow Hung looked worried. He claimed that this happened before I joined Pingwang Capital. Then they got separated. When I first saw you that year, your appearance was so much like him. Shadow Hung served Pierce Pei a bowl of ginseng soup. Go on. I know you care for me like a sister. In my heart, you're like a brother to me. Shadowglow City, and you are the most important things to me. I won't let heir apparent make things difficult for you. Pierce Pei was pleasantly surprised to hear these words. Coming from a humble background, how could one be so fortunate? Shadow Hung comforted Pierce Pei and said, Is that really what you think? Look at all these years, who else has seventh uncle chosen? And how many people have faced the cursed sword without hesitation, but instead gone all out? I regard you as a younger brother, regardless of your background. Moreover, my lord has already appointed you as an imperial guard. Mentioning Lord of City Pierce Pei, I am more concerned about potentially putting the second manager in a difficult situation regarding the cursed sword matter. However, Shadow Hung is very knowledgeable about Sky Strike Dugu. My lord may seem casual, but he is not someone unaware of this situation. Sky Strike Dugu, when he was young, was one of the top young masters in the Dugu Imperial clan. Quite different from what he looks like now. Sky Strike Dugu is the uncle of the current emperor. When the emperor was still a crown prince, Sky Strike Dugu served as his tutor, and their relationship was deep. Sky Strike Dugu has always been cautious and tried to avoid involvement in court politics. However, the emperor's intentions are hard to predict. The emperor was jealous of Sky Strike Dugu's royal status and his close relationship with the crown prince. Thus, he ordered the old prime minister, Yuan Zhengtao, to eliminate him. At that time, this influential prime minister, who was already in his twilight years, set a trap, determined to result Sky Strike Dugu before his own passing. Fortunately, Sky Strike Dugu realized in time and pretended to indulge in pleasure-seeking to avoid disaster. At the critical moment, Shadow Hung used the various connections he had accumulated during his courtesan days to be able to move his whole family to East Sea. Sky Strike Dugu was grateful to Shadow Hung for saving him from danger, so he granted him permission to operate Shadowglow City. He also deeply understood that only Shadow Hung's ability and leadership could sustain the operation of Shadowglow City. So Sky Strike Dugu will not make things difficult for Shadow Hung. As for the matter of the cursed sword, his sister can handle it. You can rest assured to do your own thing. His sister will fully support you. Shadow Hung smiling knowingly. Pierce Pei feels like his heart has melted. Pierce Pei pours his heart out to Shadow Hung as well, without holding anything back. He claims there is one thing about the cursed sword that he has never told his sister. Before Elder Water Lute Demon passed away, he used the soul reclamation technique to leave his consciousness in my body. So, that's why I had such a reaction when facing the cursed sword Heaven's Rift at the banquet. This news is very shocking for Shadow Hung. Shadow Hung knows what actions Water Lute Demon will take after seizing a new body. Shadow Hung let Pierce Pei leave quietly from the back door. Then they won't run into the heir apparent spies. They watched the figure of Pierce Pei disappear into the distance. Shadow Hung fell into contemplation. He could only take a gamble on his own. Pierce Pei returned to his residence and freshened up by changing into comfortable clothes and washing himself. Clara Lena suddenly burst in and claimed to help Pierce Pei change clothes and freshen up. Pierce Pei was very uncomfortable and frightened. Pierce Pei sees a dark-skinned person in the mirror. Thick eyebrows, big eyes, and neat clothes. It's like a completely different person, not at all like myself. Changed into new clothes. Pierce Pei practiced with Old Hu again. Today, the two of them switched to wooden swords for the match. Old Hu decided to go all out and target Pierce Pei's weak points. He won't hold back. With Old Hu's strength, even a wooden sword can take a life. The move unmatched swift slash without a set form is indeed unique. But Evander Hu's teaching method is even more unique among the unique. No nonsense, no wasting time. Improve skills directly through sparring. Shadowglow City's second manager, Supervisor Yang Zhong, reports that the two persons at the back hill are still practicing martial arts. Besides, Pierce Pei seems to be making rapid progress. Shadow Hung appears visibly troubled and issued instructions. You go down and make arrangements. Inform them about that matter tomorrow. Yang Zhong is a little worried about whether Hu the Gallant will agree. Shadow Hung said you don't need to worry about it. Just make sure not to leak the information. Send out the other letters. Yang Zhong also stopped asking more questions and did as told. Shadow Hung looked out the window, thinking to himself that if galloping and singing lived up to their name, it would be worth taking a gamble. The cursed sword will come when it's time. After a long battle. Evander Hu came to Dr. Chung with Pierce Pei to treat his muscles and bones. After several manipulations, Pierce Pei was restored to his original condition. Pierce Pei's performance earned praise from Evander Hu. Being able to spar with Evander Hu, who uses internal energy, is considered a pass. Evander Hu asked, "May I ask, how are the previous Emerald Lake girl and silly donkey doing now?" Dr. Chung stroked his beard and said slowly, "Although they are not completely awake, their condition has stabilized. Both of you can go see them today. In addition, I have made some unusual findings regarding the so-called cursed sword possessed by these two." Evander, who looked at Emerald Lake lying on the bed, with a worried expression. He asked why she had been in a coma for so long. Is there really no problem? But Dr. Chung claimed that this would actually be more beneficial for her physical recovery. If she were awake, she would inevitably suffer pain and torment. Dr. Chung is convinced that the previous pursuit by the Emerald Lake lady from thousands of miles away was forcibly triggering her hidden potential, living beyond her means. Her body has reached its limit any longer, and it may be beyond saving. It is unknown how she is resisting the excruciating pain of her internal organs feeling like they are about to burst. Pierce Pei recalled the situation and felt like Emerald Lake was being controlled by some kind of drug. According to Dr. Cheng's observations, there are drugs that can excessively stimulate hidden potential. In nearly 50 years of medical practice, he has only encountered 3 types. However, none of these drugs has symptoms similar to those exhibited by the girl at Emerald Lake. Additionally, there were no drug residues found on the girl at Emerald Lake. For the doctor, it's better to believe in magic than to believe in the existence of such miraculous drugs in the world. For now, as long as the girl at Emerald Lake can regulate her chi and blood and gradually nurture her life, there should be no worries. With the reassurance of no worries about her life, Evander, who started to be concerned about the scar on Emerald Lake's face. Dr. Chung stroked his beard. It is said that there is a mysterious person in East Sea. He is known as a surgical wizard, and is said to be able to perform the art of regenerating flesh by cutting it off. Pierce Pei is also very concerned about the young man Silly Donkey, who is different from the girl from Emerald Lake. He is poisoned, and the poison entered through a sharp weapon piercing his hand. The poison entered the pericardium meridian of Hanjuyan and the governor vessel meridian, leading to an excess of evil energy and deficiency of yang energy. Although cutting off the supply, it will slowly dissipate. But it affects fertility. If he touches that knife again, it is estimated that even his life will be difficult to protect. Pierce Pei is worried about the safety of Silly Donkey. But if he wants to stop this showdown with Victor Chandler, the most important person to persuade is Silly Donkey himself. At this moment, Yi Tassel Huang came to visit Emerald Lake and saw the departing figure of Pierce Pei. Yi Tassel Huang suddenly handed the tonic soup to Evander who, claiming that he had something to discuss privately with Pierce Pei. Immediately, he dragged Pierce Pei and ran towards the backyard. Yi Tassel Huang sat by the pond in the backyard. He claimed that he came out to allow Old Hu and Emerald Lake to be alone together. It turns out that Yi Tassel Huang had noticed it a long time ago. Evander, who has a crush on Emerald Lake. Today is not the first time he has come to ask about Emerald Lake. Yi Tassel Huang's watery big eyes blinked. Playfully said, "These days, you haven't come to ask about Sister Crimson. How is she doing?" Upon hearing this, Pierce Pei scratched his head awkwardly. He didn't know what to do for a moment. He also didn't know if it was appropriate to go see Crimson Clouds. Suddenly, he became flustered. But Yi Tassel Huang suddenly stood up and said, "That's settled then. I will go talk to Sister Crimson right now and tell her you're coming to see her. Get yourself ready." Pierce Pei looked at his reflection in the water and couldn't help but feel shy. Crimson Clouds learned that Pierce Pei was coming to visit, and a blush appeared on her cheeks. Still, she stubbornly said, "Why should I see him?" But Yi Tassel Huang had long seen through Crimson Cloud's thoughts and said slowly, "He must be concerned about you, Sister Crimson. By the way, our letters have been sent out for a while now. I reckon first seeing your sister will be here in a few days. By then, we will have to return to Moonlit Water Pavilion." Upon hearing this, Crimson Clouds felt a hint of loss. Qian tightly grasped her delicate jade fingers and whispered, "We have indeed troubled Shadglow City for quite a few days." It should also be said, "Thank you." Crimson Clouds noticed the crimson gauze dress spread out flat on the brocade quilt corner of her eye. It is the embroidered quilt that is padded underneath, covered with a profusion of flowers. Yet it cannot conceal the light gauze of cicada wings, which are as red and hazy as rouge, both misty and glamorous. It is as if a rosy cloud lies on the couch. Recalling the bits and pieces of days with Pierce Pei, I truly have experienced a lot. Crimson Clouds feels deeply touched. Shedding the armor of war, facing the mirror, and pasting on golden flower decorations. In the bronze mirror, a beautiful woman with a slightly exposed chest and a high-waisted skirt was reflected. The familiar image of the heroic and mighty hero disappeared. In its place was an elegant young woman with graceful charm and beauty. Just like the shadow-hung scene that night in the incense pavilion. Her bare, round, fragrant shoulders were fair and tender, exuding an indescribable femininity. Pierce Pei prepared a basket of preserved fruits and arrived at the disciples' door of Moonlit Water. Yi Tassel Huang took the initiative to receive Pierce Pei and said playfully, "Please wait in the hall while I go boil some water to make tea for you and Sister Crimson." Pierce Pei keeps practicing his opening remarks. The young woman in the red shirt by the window couldn't help but laugh. Suddenly, there was a sense of destined peace,